So we are live on YouTube, and just try and get it live on Facebook. But if you wanted to start now.
Well, shall I give you a minute or so, Ian?
Thank you. Tim, we advertise it as Facebook, and I think on the county website it says YouTube. So we're broadcasting on YouTube, and we're going to put Facebook Live, a link from Facebook to YouTube.
Okay.
So I think we can start, and then we'll post it.
Start. Okay, fair enough. Yeah. Okay. All right then. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to the meeting of the Farnham board on the 16th of December. This now is a hybrid meeting, partly because of the lack of any trains, or very many trains running, and also because of the weather. So it just felt sensible to have this as online, but also there are some members in the town council chamber. We've got a lot to cover off today, actually, and we have an hour and a half. So I would ask that we try and move the conversations along at a reasonable pace, obviously giving everybody the opportunity to speak. But if we could sort of try and focus on the key issues, that would be really helpful. It is a meeting that is being held in public, in the sense that it is being webcast, but it is not a public meeting in that sense. There are, I'm not sure what apologies for absence we've got, but we'll record those in the minutes for publication. I mean, I think we're at I hope a really interesting stage now in the work that's been done around the Farnham Improvement Plan. There's been a lot of activity, a lot of input. I'm very grateful to residents that have contributed to the various consultations. And today we will look at some proposals in relation to the traffic flow and the pavement improvements and widening and so on across the key roads in the centre of the town. I would just make the point that I know that there has been a keenness for a number of people to see full pedestrianisation of the town centre, and the proposals, just to bear that in mind when we talk about the detail, nothing that is being proposed will prevent full pedestrianisation in due course, if that is appropriate. The genuine concerns and understandable concerns are that by doing even the steps that we're proposing now may result in displacement of traffic, and we need to make sure that there are appropriate mitigations for that. So this, I see this as a next stage, and an important next stage, for the improvement of the experience in Farnham, and particularly addressing the pollution and air quality issues. But if I could just ask, please, that we focus today on the proposals that are in front of everybody, but to reassure people that if at some point it is felt that we can safely move to full pedestrianisation, there'll be a further discussion with residents, but there's nothing that would preclude that from the current proposals. There have been some questions that have been submitted from the public, which we will try and pick up as we move along, and grateful to the Town Council also for their written submission that we received in the last couple of days, accepting that needs to have approval of full council at some point. So can we move then through to the next item on the agenda, which are the minutes of the meeting, of the last meeting. Those have been circulated. Were there any comments on those, any inaccuracies or anything, or can I take those as being agreed? In the absence of any hands going up, I'll assume those are agreed. Thank you very much. Item 3 then is the short and medium. We'll pick up all the action points from the minutes as we go through. We'll start now with the short and medium term interventions update, and I'll pass over to Elaine Martin, who will take us through those. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. If I start on wayfinding, because actually the HGV and the removing the A road category status is complete as far as construction goes, apart from some sort of a few elements. The wayfinding strategy. So we've finalised the maps and artwork for the totems which are going in. We've had them manufactured, and we actually are on site now installing. So you may have seen that on site. So we'll be continuing with that. And we've drafted a legal agreement for maintenance of these products, and we'll be sending them to Farnham Town Council after this meeting. Any questions before I move on to that? Catherine?
Yeah, so just on the HGVs, I understand that most of the signage is in, obviously the planned signage is in, obviously the stuff in Hampshire is still outstanding. I am still getting significant feedback from HGV operators about the signage we previously discussed on the Hogsback. I thought in the last meeting we had agreed that we would look at that again. And there's also concern about the fact that the online reporting facility is not yet available, and that we need to use that online reporting facility on breaches to justify the use of number plate recognition cameras in the area. So again, I would really encourage us to try to facilitate those things as well, and perhaps we could track them on this log. But thank you, Elaine.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Noted, Catherine. 20 miles per hour. So we've completed some design meetings with various teams within Surrey and our partners Waverley and Farnham, so to make sure it conforms with heritage, etc. And we've reviewed the schemes with members. We are taking out Upper Hale to a new traffic regulation order, so this will be re-advertised. Quite a positive thing, although we'll be changing from cushions to tables as requested by the police and our emergency services and safety audit. We are actually including a crossing in Upper Hale, requested by Councillor Powell, so that would be now included in the new advertised order. However, we are engaged with our contractors, and we're looking to start the new year for works on Waden Lane and Farnham Town Centre. Any questions? Thank you. Moving on to the next slide, please. Sorry, I missed a slide, but I kind of whizzed through 20. Apologies. Katie, if you can put it onto slide 3. Yeah. Hale Trail and Scholars Greenway. We did carry out some pedestrian and cycle surveys along with some ecology surveys in Farnham Park. We've been talking to our partners, Waverley Borough Council, and they will be taking forward these schemes. They are landowners, but Surrey will be assisting with developing a brief for the feasibility study on the cycle routes within this park. Borelli's Park and Stride. So we've completed pedestrian. Sorry, I have to keep an eye. Do prompt me if there's any questions. Borelli's Park and Stride. We've again completed pedestrian and cycle surveys, and we've also done some ecology surveys. We've been reviewing the legal position of cycling through the park. So we'll be looking at taking forward a planning application. And so we're developing some initial designs and some costings to take back to this board. And we'll be looking at taking forward a planning application and a cycle track order for these because they require that. So at the moment, we're just looking at an initial design and cost of the scheme to bring back to this board so we can discuss it further, because obviously there's implications of funding, etc. So that's something that we'll be looking at in the new year and bring forward. Catherine.
Elaine, yeah, it's Catherine.
Sorry, I didn't do it fast enough on the Hale Trail and the Scholars Greenway. We've obviously discussed the section of the Scholars Greenway between the park and Hale Road, which is the current point of real conflict. It's the narrowest section where we get real conflict between pedestrians and cyclists. I know you and I have discussed it several times. It's that section that I think it is most urgently needed for review, and it seems to be that section that we keep leaving out. And I am slightly concerned that the feasibility has to be based on the issues of ecology, as we've previously discussed, and also the cycling access through the park. So I'm just trying to make sure that we get those issues bottomed out first before we move on, because I kind of feel like we've obviously cancelled the last couple of meetings with the Friends of Farnham Park. And I would kind of like to just make sure that maybe we reinstate that meeting and we do have a discussion with them about what's come out of the habitat surveys and the other surveys before we move on.
Okay, thank you. Waverley are actually on the call at the moment, so I'll pass it over to them to take forward in their brief, hopefully. Thank you.
They hadn't previously engaged with the Friends of Farnham Park. That was obviously one of the concerns flagged at a previous board meeting.
Okay, thank you. Water Lane. So we carried out some preliminary design and costings, and we've developed a community infrastructure levy bid for funding to Waverley Borough Council. We are actually waiting the outcome, which is due in March 2023. Next slide. Town centre. So before we go on to the actual town centre scheme, sorry, was it Paul? Would you like to come in?
I think there's something in the chat.
Oh, lovely.
Sorry, I was just in the chat having some technical issues, but yeah, Catherine, if you wanted to speak to us about Peter and I about that other issue, then we can deal with that offline if that's all right.
Perfect. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. So the town centre, this is one obviously everyone's very interested in at the moment. We've carried out some feasibility design and testing of some options with modelling, etc. And we produced all the consultation material ready for the main public exhibitions. We've did some visualisation. Obviously, we had some events in the town. So we had 4 events in the town, and we presented these. And we also had some virtual reality events as well. So the latest thing we've been doing is looking at the feedback for the hybrid design. Katie, if you just go on to the next slide, just to kind of give a bit of context, we have been really busy. We've had these events, face-to-face meetings. We have our commonplace site, which people have submitted questions to. We've worked with our partners who they've been advertising the actual exhibition, etc., on their Facebook page, not Facebook, web pages, Waverley and Farnham, and the visualization is available to view, so you can see it as well, you know, in how it would look and, you know, how great Farnham would be. And then actually we've had, it's a positive thing, we've had some debate within, you know, the local newspaper Farnham Herald, and it's nice to kind of know and get feeling and sort of see sort of what's happening, you know, with everybody's views. So it's been a good kind of base to start this exhibition. Katie, on the next slide. we've also had, like I say, this VR event. This was aimed at younger generations as well as, you know, the traditional kind of consultation. We've also gone on social media sites, etc. So we've kind of covered at this time different age ranges. We haven't just had the traditional. So it's been very interesting. It's been, you know, I'm sure Tim will come in, a good test for sort of further engagement for Surrey. So this was a good starting point for Surrey to see sort of how it goes. I mean, I'm going to pass over to Abigail in our insights team to discuss the results of the paper, but I don't know, Tim, if you want to just fill in before Abigail comes in.
Well, no, I think, as you say, Elaine, I mean, hopefully, using all the different channels of sort of engagement, we've had a reasonably good response. I mean, it's always challenging, isn't it, particularly to get to younger people. But the virtual event I thought was excellent. You know, and there was some you know, really active engagement from the younger generation. I mean, it's of course it would have been good to have more responses, but I think we can assume that those that didn't respond weren't objecting to the proposals. But I don't know if any of the other councillors want to, you know, to chip in. But I think it felt as if it was a good process. Andy.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I actually attended all of the virtual events, actually, and they generated quite a lot of enthusiasm. The only qualification I'd make is in terms of the headset visualization, rather than doing the one sitting down with a computer, it was mainly the younger people who did that. So I wouldn't take too seriously the yes/no answers, because you know, you could indicate yes, no, and that was mainly done by young children who I don't think were too bothered about answering the questions. They just wanted to actually move around the town. But I think from a PR point of view, they were absolutely excellent events. And I would take seriously the answers where you had older people sitting down at a computer and answering questions and so on. But I thought they were terrific events, actually, Tim, and there was a lot of enthusiasm at these events.
Yeah, no, indeed. Catherine?
Yeah, I just want to say that the events that we put on in North Farnham were obviously, you know, done after the town centre events, and you know, Andy came along and supported a number of those, as did Councillor Beeman, and it was really interesting. Actually, we had some really open and honest conversations about, you know, the very constrained nature of our town and the need to balance solutions between different users, and it was interesting how people's views changed during discussion. So I think it was a well worthwhile exercise. I certainly learned a lot from some of those discussions, and I think those that came along did as well. So I think it was well worthwhile.
Yeah, and people could kind of really visualize what was being proposed. Okay, Elaine, I think should we hand over to Abby then, who will take us through the consultation, so in a bit more detail.
One second, I'm just going to share my screen if that's all right.
Yeah, you were there. I think it seems to just a bit off.
Is that working?
Not at the moment. Oh, hang on, something's coming up. Yeah, if you just put that on slideshow then.
Yeah, we'll do that now. Okay. So today I'm going to take you through a summary of the report that has been shared in full in the kind of papers. But yeah, so this is just a summary report today around all the different ways we've engaged. So as you all know, and have already discussed, it was a very broad reaching kind of piece of work, and variety of methods were used to reach all of the different parts of the community. So we had the commonplace, we had the paper questionnaires, we also used social media, which had a really large scale response, but due to their nature, they are a much lighter touch methodology. We had the exhibitions and virtual reality events, which again reached different audiences. And then lastly, we also received 26 additional emails directly to the Farnham inbox that provided sometimes people responding in addition to previous responses, and then other times they were from kind of key stakeholders such as Stagecoach and other kind of vested parties. From this, we can say that we have reached a somewhat representative sample across each of these different methodologies based on Farnham's resident population. The representative sample would be about 2,200 respondents. So across these, we've definitely kind of reached those numbers. So now I'm going to go through the results. So on the commonplace and through the more formal consultation, respondents were asked to provide their kind of yes/no binary around whether they would support the implementation of option A, which was the kind of permanent introduction of the kind of current temporary situation. So as you'll see, 54% of the 506 who responded to this question were supportive, which was also reflected in the social media poll, in which we asked around kind of making the temporary Castle Street layout permanent. 77% said they would be supportive. The reasons people gave were very varied for why they felt this way. So those that supported this, they often felt it was created a nicer environment and would reduce traffic. They said it was more pedestrian friendly, and they felt that it was often a step in the right direction. For those who didn't support the proposal, this was again for lots of different reasons, but some of those were that they felt it didn't go far enough to tackle the issues in Farnham around congestion and poor air quality, and it was still a kind of real key concern that they actually felt that the proposal could increase congestion and thus pollution. And finally, they felt that it kind of presented an increase in danger for both pedestrians, with the removal of the barrier that is currently there along Castle Street and Downing Street of the kind of flower planters. With those being removed, they felt that the barrier removal was an issue, and also cyclists being a danger for cyclists due to a lack of cycle lanes. So respondents also provided specific feedback on certain aspects of the design, and this section includes responses from both the formal consultation as well as the email responses we received. So I'm only going to pull out the top 3 here, but again, these were listed in full in the full report. And also to note that we have removed any responses that only had one respondent who brought them forward. So cycle infrastructure was raised by 51 respondents, with the kind of key issue being around the feeling that cycle parking itself, which was kind of great to see increased, but actually would be not very useful if there wasn't cycle lanes or increased wider cycle infrastructure. With widening pavements, there were 41 comments. And in general, this was to indicate a real support for the widening of pavements, with some kind of comments about only widening in certain places and not others. So, for example, along Castle Street, feeling that there shouldn't be any widening of the pavement along the top end. And thirdly, there was some discussion around kind of new trees and planters. So lots of people were in support, and they felt that they really highlighted the benefit these would have for the health of residents and the environment. There was concerns about kind of the cost that could be involved, and also that the type of trees needs to be considered to ensure that they're kind of low pollen, native and drought tolerant, so that they don't in the long term become a cost issue. These 3 topics were also raised quite a lot at the virtual reality events, where kind of cycle infrastructure was a real kind of key concern, for participants, but they really did enjoy the kind of updated look and feel of the widened pavements and greenery. When it came next, I'm going to talk about the proposal B, option B, which is around the restructuring of the wider kind of transport directions and kind of really making those beginning to make those larger changes. So again, of the 506 people that responded to our yes, no question, nearly 60% of those were supportive of the implementation. Again, people supported because they felt it would vastly improve the pedestrian experience and begin to remove congestion from the town, which would make driving better and also improve air quality. For those 27% who didn't support, they said that they felt it would increase congestion, which they felt would then increase pollution, and that without alternative routes, it would just displace the problem to surrounding areas, which for many was kind of not acceptable. Also, many said that they didn't support it but due to the lack of segregated cycle lanes. Again, when pulling out kind of feedback on the specific areas of the design, cycle infrastructure was raised again as a really key issue for respondents, saying kind of the cycle paths really being needed, and especially even requesting more cycle parking, including outside Elphick. Bus stops was the second most commented, was one of the third most commented actually, topic for option B, with a real kind of highlighting the need for buses to have laybys, kind of really coming forward. Everyone who spoke about buses said bus stops should not be in the moving traffic, and then also highlighting that they need to have a shelter to be useful. And also widen pavements. So again, support was indicated for these, additionally really liking them for the use of outside dining. Again, this reflected the feedback that was received at the virtual reality event, and it was also seen through the second social media poll, in which a large percentage agreed that they would like to see these changes. For the A31, residents were asked about some of the key junctions, and this was very much an early on kind of consultation, not the kind of full formal consultation yet. 306 respondents to these questions. And as you can see, for Coxbridge and Shepherds and Flock roundabout, there was a real indication of support, with 42% indicating that they were either very happy or happy to support the Coxbridge roundabout, and 29% saying they were supportive of the Shepherd and Flock roundabout. When it comes to Hickley's Corner, here we were asking around what the option people might be most supportive of, and nearly 50% said they would prefer the underpass. Coming on to active and sustainable travel. So just to provide a bit of context for the data that we'll be talking about, overall of the 500 unique respondents on the commonplace, so that's the overall site, the primary method of transport to and around Farnham was the private car, and the second being kind of walking. Just to kind of give you some indication of what the backdrop is for when we're discussing active and sustainable travel. So they were provided with the opportunity to kind of really talk about what they wanted around active and sustainable travel, and about 114 respondents answered these questions. But there was actually a real division around this topic, with kind of 31% saying they were either happy or very happy, whereas kind of 32% says that they were unhappy or very unhappy with the current situation in Farnham. When they were asked to kind of their ideas around how we could increase walking, cycling and bus usage, a variety of ideas were put forward, some of which are already being thought through. So the inclusion of a park and stride, the creation of connected walkways, the creation of the 20-mile-per-hour zone were all seen to really improve the walking space. Around cycling, the kind of introduction of dedicated, safe and continuous cycle lanes again was raised, and a general reduction in traffic levels away from the town centre was also highlighted. And lastly, when it came to around bus usage, this was much more around kind of the improving the service that is currently provided. So increasing frequency and reliability, and also ensuring the affordability of the service. And lastly, I've pulled out a slide around pedestrianisation. So in the formal consultation, we did not ask any questions around pedestrianisation, and actually only 39 of the respondents to the commonplace mentioned pedestrianisation at all. In addition, in the emails, there were 6 respondents who raised the issue of pedestrianisation, but not all of these were actually in support of it. 20% of the 45 were actually against it and kind of didn't want pedestrianisation at all. Furthermore, of the 45, of the 36 who were supportive in some manner, it wasn't always full pedestrianisation of the town. 8 only wanted partial pedestrianisation, so they put forward specific streets, such as Park Row. 1 suggested the introduction of weekend-only pedestrianisation, as seen in some other kind of towns around Surrey. And 1 also said that pedestrianisation they were in generally supportive of, but actually wouldn't be viable unless there was provision to divert the traffic away from Farnham. And finally, just want to say that there were 12 of those who were supportive that actually suggested that they supported option B as a step towards pedestrianisation, and were happy to go for option B at the current time. And now the recommendations come from the team that were working on it more closely. These aren't necessarily my recommendations, but are based on kind of the overall findings that were shared in the report. And they include proceeding with the proposals as tabled for Castle Street and Downing Street, and in the borough where there's a strong support evidence because there's strong support for them. Investigating the potential two-way traffic on the east-west section of Downing Street, investigating the potential for active travel routes on Park Row, facilitated by restrictions, and then further work to be looked on additional and varied topics. And that's it for my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Abby. Right, we'll take some comments. Yeah, Peter first.
Thank you, Tim. I think Abigail and her team must be congratulated on this excellent report of the responses to the consultation. So well done. The responses are clearly shown using percentages, and we have some good pie charts and bar charts. I'm also pleased to see that not too much weight was given to the virtual responses, as it could be argued they were spontaneously given, as opposed to online and email responses, which in the main would have been more considered and thoughtful. As with others, I would have wanted more than 500 people to have engaged with the Commonplace platform, but it certainly wasn't for the lack of trying. However, in saying that, I think it's certainly a case of quality over quantity. whilst the quantitative measurements given in the yes/no answers scenarios are clear and definitive, the qualitative feedback text excellent. That the FI team
Peter, you're breaking up
taking
there.
these on board for just a more general comment. Sorry, Tim.
You were breaking up there, so we lost that last little bit.
Sorry. Just finishing by making a more general comment. The residents of Farnham who use the town centre are made up of motorists, those who use public transport, cyclists and pedestrians. My role as a Farnham councillor and that of others who sit on the board is to speak up for all of these groups. At any one time, there are more pedestrians in the town centre than car users and cyclists put together. And although I recognise that many of them will have reached the town using various forms of transport, including trains and bus. So the pure maths tell me that pedestrians come first when thinking about the town centre's infrastructure. Pedestrians are not represented by any pressure groups. They are, in fact, the silent majority. One of the challenges we've all been wrestling with is how to navigate through the views and desires of all the various interested parties and pressure groups. That's why the responses to this consultation, including the ones from the Town Centre and the Farnham Society, have been really, really useful. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you very much, Peter. That's very helpful. Thank you. Jeremy.
Thanks, Tim. I just wanted to very strongly support the recommendations that were made. I think that, we all know that Farnham could have so much more to offer than it currently does, given how beautiful and historic and wonderful the town centre is in many ways. And we've all come at it from slightly different starting points. And I think everyone is making compromises because it's important to find a way that we can all come together. But I think when you step back, this is the biggest set of changes that I can remember in the 17 years that I've been representing the town. It's absolutely huge. And I think it's really, really exciting. So I think the consultation has been very, very thorough. If I'd been personally replying, I would have ticked all the boxes for more and more pedestrianisation. But this is a very big step towards making it more pedestrian friendly, less polluted. I think there's, significant improvements that are going to be made, not just in the town centre and throughout. So I just wanted to say really thank you. I think we've done and made enormous progress and it has my strong support.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jeremy. I don't know, David, is that your hand up in the council chamber or somebody's?
Okay. This is indeed Tim. Can you hear me?
We can indeed, David, yep.
Right, thank you very much. Farnham Town Council, it was fortuitous this meeting is today because last night it was the full council meeting of Farnham Town Council, at which we considered a number of recommendations in support of the consultation exercise. I'm pleased to say, well, I've already circulated the 17 major points that the Town Council can put forward. And I'm pleased to say that on 16 of them, it received unanimous, virtually, support. I won't go through it. I mean, I would particularly, for example, welcome the undertaking to investigate the potential for two-way traffic flow on Woolmead Road, for example. We support, for example, the designation of Park Road as an active travel route. And we support the proposal, for example, of two-way traffic on the section of Downing Street between Lower Church Lane and Long Bridge. Our problem comes, in fact, with the Upper Hart Link Road, and that leads on to the next paper. I'd like to read you a short statement. On the final page of the Farnham Infrastructure Programme's high-level feasibility report and the proposed Upper Hart Link Road, point 29 contains the conclusion recommendation, paragraph 3, stating it is recommended that further work on the route be paused and that it is removed from any emerging designs and work focused on maximising sustainable travel options for Farnham's residents. In discussion, and this was on the 13th of December of our Strategy and Finance Working Group, councillors argued that the connection road between Castlegate in Castle Street and West Street should not be removed from the draft programme, that the report was not balanced, and only made negative comments about the proposal. Made the cost of delivering an objective which would have lasting benefits was relatively small in the cost of the overall improvements of the town centre, and reduce a large percentage of through traffic using the current gyratory system, and in fact could lead to a total pedestrianisation of Castle Street. The link road would provide access to residents and visitors from North Farnham to the Heart and the University of the Creative Arts, as well as West Street, as an essential part of successful town centre improvements and minimising traffic moving around the town centre. The potential opportunity to extend this link to West Street at a future point, if not done immediately, should be incorporated within the Farnham Infrastructure Programme. There was considerable debate last night at the Town Council meeting, and in fact, Farnham Town Council, there was a motion which was strengthened at the meeting itself, and Farnham Town Council resolved by 10 votes to nil with 4 abstentions the following motion. Farnham Town Council strongly supports the construction of a road between Castlegate and West Street as a way of ameliorating traffic through the borough before the borough is narrowed. Now, feelings on this particular issue are very strong indeed. And in fact, I mean, and I think it shows that we need possibly, this is not a deciding meeting, but we would like to keep that within the programme. And in fact, we probably need to have a meeting between ourselves at enough time and place to discuss this further. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. And I know that's been a topic of conversation. I mean, just before I bring in Andy, Elaine, do you want to comment on, well, I suppose that the request is that it remains as an option within the wider scheme. I mean, I think there are potentially some complications, but Elaine, is that possible to do that and to investigate that further at some point?
We could leave it on the table, and while there's some benefits to the options presented, you know, it would have a significant negative effect on the local area. There's issues with ecology, development, creeping urbanisation. The moment you have a road in, then obviously you open up that land for development. That's something which obviously Farnham do have to consider. There's an impact on noise, air quality, historic and archaeological nature. There's additional traffic. And both routes actually introduce a significant health and safety concern as they pass by the medical centre and primary school. And actually, it's very difficult to justify in economic terms for additional funding from external sources. I mean, option 1 is 8.6 million and option 2 is 10.3 million. They're significant funding. And if we were to continue, then it would delay the town centre scheme. So, you know, that's something that why we recommend we pause for the time being, move forward on the town centre scheme and maximise our sustainable transport options.
David, do you want to
come back on that, Tim?
Yeah, do.
Just come back on that, Tim. Yeah, I think this illustrates, I think, the need for us to have a meeting between ourselves and yourself and your officers, because quite patiently, I mean, I've used, and we are the people on the ground in the local area. We accept that there could be some disbenefits. We think the benefits would greatly outweigh any disbenefits that might occur. And we totally disagree with the points that Elaine has just said, basically. But I don't think this is not a forum, I don't think, to discuss this in detail. I just want to stress the point.
Yeah. I don't know, Catherine, and I know you've some strong views, and Andy, I don't know if you're going to speak on that subject or not, but Catherine, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I can do, Tim. My concern is the percentage that this reflects of the total town centre cost. And I don't know whether or not Elaine is willing to discuss that. But the reality is that, you know, this is a significant, you know, extension in the budget that would be required to undertake the town centre works. And given the infrastructure issues that we already have on the roads that will take displaced traffic, and the cost of doing those works versus the cost of doing this, I think is not even comparable. So I am concerned about where we should be spending funds. And I think that probably a separate meeting is required, but I think that meeting needs to help people to understand the cost of this relative to other costs. because I think it becomes very difficult to justify the increased health and safety issues outside the university, the health centre, the school, the old people's home. You know, there's a lot of downsides from a road safety perspective from doing this that also need to be taken into consideration. So I think that, you know, a wider meeting where costs can be discussed in private would probably be worth having, Tim, if you would be happy to do that.
Thank you, Catherine. Andy, I'll make some comments.
Thanks, Tim. I mean, I put my hand up originally to talk about the overall, you know, response to the consultation, and I'll just say in respect to that, I'm totally supportive of what Jeremy and Peter said, actually. But just add an additional comment, actually. I think one of the really important things about the infrastructure programme is providing a better connection between the town centre and the new Brightwells and ultimately Woolmead schemes that are coming along. And that makes it particularly important to improve the pedestrian access along the narrow part of the borough. And I think that's a vitally important part of the scheme. And taking traffic out of the narrow part of the borough and out in Downing Street is very important. And in terms of the Upper Hart link, I was actually part of the team that evolved out of Jeremy asking an informal group to get together to come up with their ideas. And the ideas that team came up with were very much along the lines of option B, but also included the Upper Hart link. And the Upper Hart link does have an obvious sort of advantage in the sense that it provides a link between North and West Farnham in both directions, actually, which would avoid traffic having to go around the gyratory system. But I agree with what Catherine is saying, actually, in terms of progressing things, actually. I don't think it should be allowed to become an obstacle to progressing what we all agree needs to be done in the town centre. Maybe it shouldn't be taken off the table completely for the future, because if you actually were to do more pedestrianisation in the centre of the town, an Upper Hart link would have an advantage. You could then do things at the bottom of Castle Street, and you would avoid having to have a lot of traffic go, you know, the right turn would be less of a problem at the bottom of Castle Street. So maybe for the future, it should be there as a future option connected to future more pedestrianisation. But I really don't think it should become an issue right now and get in the way of doing what we really need to do, arising out of the consultation exercise. So that's my view on it, Tim. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Before I take any others, David, can we just come back to you a minute just for clarification? Is the town council saying that you would want some of these proposed works paused whilst that that is investigated, or would you be happy if it is left on the table for further conversations, but we push on with the rest of the scheme?
I think we want to push on with the rest of the scheme as quickly as possible. We don't want to do any delays at all. We just want this thing left on the table, and we want a more detailed. It's not for today, obviously. A more detailed discussion on the pros and cons, because as particularly look, I mean, I'm the collective voice of Farnham Town Council here, and I don't have any individual views, and I'm speaking on behalf of 40,000 people. So, so we just want this remaining on the table, but not holding up anything else. For example, you know, things like the two-way traffic on Downing Street could easily be introduced before this. The investigation, possible pedestrianisation in between on each street between on making Woolmead Road two-way. Nothing should hold that up. So
right,
we don't want to get into long grass, basically.
Yeah. Well, I'll bring you, David, for a final comment. But if you're happy, I mean, I don't think there's an issue in kind of leaving that conversation open. I think there are some complications potentially, but we need to work through those and see. I mean, personally, I think I could see the logic of putting the road in, but I don't think it's, ignoring the costs. I think there are other issues that we would need to clarify and make people comfortable with. So, subject to what David says, I think we can probably agree that we'll leave it in as an option for further discussion. But David, do you want to?
Thank you, Tim. David Stanford, Surrey County Council. Pleased to hear that this can't hold up the other options, and we can push forward with that. I'm more than happy to have a more detailed conversation I think when Lane and I looked at it around planning issues, impact on existing properties where it comes off of the Castle Hill, and again that potential then to open up development on that new link is quite key, I think, notwithstanding the fact in terms of available funding and funding that we would want to go for the town centre. So you're more than happy to have a separate conversation where we can walk through the detail and all be happy and comfortable with the implications and the pros and cons of that scheme. So thank you.
Thanks, David. So David Beeman, are you happy with that as a way forward?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the threat of the development is there in that area, whether or not a link road was built, whether or not, quite frankly, and as we've been kicking the traces now for some time. I just think that we just do not want this particular scheme kicked into the long grass. We acknowledge there's some problems with it. Yeah, it's not the easiest thing in the world to do, but the benefits of it, we believe, will be far greater than the disbenefits.
Yeah. Okay, well, no, that's very helpful. Thank you. So we'll do as you've requested, which is to leave that in for then more detailed discussions outside of this meeting over the coming weeks.
Thank you very much.
I think that brings us to the end of the sort of the conversations around the consultation and the scheme. Elaine, do we kind of do you want to wrap that up then and just tell us the way forward?
Yes, Katie. Moving on to the next bit, actually, the more kind of interesting next steps. I'm going to pass it over to my colleague from Atkins, Chris Greenwoods, who's just going to run through actually what the hybrid proposal looks like. So we've used some of the images just from the consultation as well, just to kind of give you a little bit of context, because obviously sometimes on the plans it's kind of difficult to show. So I'll pass over to Chris.
Thank you. Chris, are you there? Yeah, you're unmuted, but we can't hear you. Lane, do you want to just fill in a little bit while? I don't know what's happening there with Chris.
Alex, do you want to take over?
Hi, morning all. Happy to. I think Chris is potentially experiencing some IT issues, so I'll kick things off in his absence. So the plan on the right is just to illustrate some of the points that that were really covered towards the end of the consultation report summary by way of next stages. So the section in, well, the majority of the section in green is the section that the report proposes that we proceed with as tabled in the consultation. So that is the alterations to the borough, the footway widenings that Andy mentioned are so crucial to improve the east-west access movement for pedestrians, widening of Castle Street in terms of the footways to facilitate greening, outside dining, alterations to Downing Street on its north-south axis. So the narrowing of the carriageway and widening of footways, particularly those sections on the northern end, which are currently very narrow. And then there are some minor alterations, which again we've briefly touched on earlier on in this meeting. So investigation of the viability or potential viability of transitioning the east-west axis of Downing Street between Lower Church Lane and Longbridge to two-way working. There will be some need for further careful consideration of the junction with Longbridge. It's a tricky balancing act. I know some people have asked us, can we potentially remove traffic signal control at that junction if Union Road and South Street revert back to their current arrangement, which is one-way working. We will look into that. It may be feasible, but there is the other request that's come up quite significantly, which is to try and improve pedestrian safety and ease of movement between Gostrey Meadow and the town centre, and that may necessitate traffic signal control in order to provide something that's safe for pedestrians to make that movement. So we'll balance that up when we're looking at options there. There are some changes in the purple coloured area, which people have asked us to look into, which is to retain one-way movement on southbound between Union Road and East Street and the Borough. So we will have a look at that in a bit more detail, and that may open up some alternative means to factor in some of the requests we've had from the consultation that weren't possible in the design that was tabled at consultation. For instance, could we look at improvements to bus or cycle provision along that network? So that's something that we will be looking into. And then the northernmost end, we'll also be looking at Park Row, transitioning that to an active travel corridor with some access restrictions. That would have the added benefit of ameliorating the risk of HGV strikes against some of the listed buildings, which has been an ongoing issue in that location, as well as improving road safety conditions. There are some issues with the current arrangement, which is one-way working for motorised vehicles, but with contraflow movements for pedestrians and cyclists. So we're keen to remove that risk and improve safety in that location. And then there are other alterations which we've been asked to pick up slightly further east, which I think Andy has briefly touched on, such as looking at the potential viability of transitioning Wallmead and East Street. The exact details of that we'll need to work through, because there's a crucial interplay at the Royal Deer Junction. We don't want to introduce too many new movements there, because that would increase congestion. We'd need to have significant additional traffic phases if there's lots of two-way movements all meeting in that one location. So we'll look into that and see what options we can come up with. It may be that some, but not all, are viable. So we'll look at perhaps 2 or 3 options there to enable a discussion and a discourse to reach a consensus on which is the best way forward in that location. So that's it. If we could move to the next slide, I think it probably covers much of the same. I think it's just the images that shift, which help to provide a bit of spatial context and some of the ideas that were tabled at consultation. But those are the crucial elements of the proposal. So happy to table any questions.
Thank you very much, Alex. So just to be clear, the proposal is really to look to press ahead with those that are green, but not those that are in purple.
Yes, that's right, Tim. Yeah, the elements in purple would need further design work to investigate. So the areas in green, broadly as tabled at consultation, with the 2 exceptions. Those, it's a bit difficult to see, but the elements Park Row and Downing Street on the east-west axis have that sort of blue-black box around them, and there are areas where we're broadly proceeding with what was tabled at consultation with a few minor tweaks. So investigating the potential of two-way working on that east-west axis on Downing Street, but the purple areas are those that do require more work. So those purple zones won't be as tabled in either option A or option B. There'll be something new to feed in comments that we've received. So they'll need a bit more design work to address people's comments and requests.
And I think the most significant change is not suggesting or proposing a two-way traffic in South Street.
Indeed, Tim. Yeah, there's quite a lot of feedback on that. Some people supportive of what we tabled previously, and that it might unlock and alleviate some issues that are currently experienced in the town. But there were a lot of conflicting views with concerns that were raised and requests that we look again at that. So yeah, we're obviously rightfully hitting pause on there, because there wasn't the consensus on that section that there was for Downing Street, the Borough, and Castle Street. So I think it would be imprudent of us to just proceed as we tabled. We need to have a look at making sure we're coming up with the right option for everyone.
Okay, thanks, Alex. Right, Andy first then.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, I mean, we consulted on two-way traffic, and South Street had been part of option B. And I think that's attractive from the point of view that if you're coming up from the south and you want to go east, you then don't have to go all the way around the gyratory system, and it takes traffic out of Downing Street and out of the borough. But the problem, as Alex said, is it'll increase congestion at the Royal Deer Junction. So I think that needs to be looked at very carefully, and possibly it's impossible to do it without increasing the congestion too much, which would cause backing up into the borough and even into Castle Street, and make it pretty difficult for people to turn right out at the bottom of Castle Street. So I think it's right to take that out of the definite proposals and to be evaluated as a future. What could be looked at, though, is having two-way traffic just in Union Road itself. That's the road that goes along the bottom of the purple section, because in fact that would allow people to reach the A31 without going all the way around the gyratory system, and that would be helpful, although it would require traffic lights at the junction of South Street and Union Road. But I think that can be looked at without necessarily two-way traffic in South Street. So that's my comments on that. But I think the team is right to have created this purple section that needs further investigation. Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Andy. Catherine?
Yeah, I'd just like to, a couple of things. One is on the green sections. My understanding was we were going to take the feedback from the consultation on those and do some modifications to those and not just accept them as they are. And I think that is important to note. I think that the displacement of traffic and the impact of traffic outside the town centre, and indeed the air quality outside the town centre. And you've got to bear in mind that on the Upper Hale Road, we're only just below the limits now. And, the residential properties on the Upper Hale Road are significantly closer to the road than they are in the town centre. And I guess I have a real concern about narrowing the borough and in terms of traffic, because as David knows, I do still have ongoing concerns about the traffic modelling, not taking into account the localised development, particularly to the north of the town, which is already going to increase traffic. So I would really like to sit down and do some comparative modelling of the different options that exist. We've already talked about the Hart Link Road. What traffic would that alleviate? What wouldn't it alleviate? What can we do to improve the environment on the roads where this traffic is going to be displaced to? Because road safety is already an issue on those roads. The pavements in some places are either non-existent or 80 centimetres wide. 80 centimetres wide against a guidance width of 2 metres. So, and just, and I'm sorry that I've raised it many times, Tim, I'm fully supportive of proceeding on the basis of Castle Street and Downing Street. I absolutely understand the desire to widen the pavements in the borough for all of the reasons that, that Andy has outlined. And I can understand, I didn't live in the town when South Street was one way, but I've seen the representations that have been made, and I can understand the reason for removing that two-way section. But we absolutely need to sit down and review the modelling of the different options that exist to mitigate the impacts and work out which ones work for the whole town. And I really do want us to be looking at that impact in 2025, not in 2042, and be having a real discussion about where we're at today, because I am concerned. I remain concerned about the impact outside the town.
If I could just come back on your question, just to give you some, I guess, consensus that is happening, the confidence that is happening. So some of the modelling work to amend the scenario year is underway. We will obviously be modelling any changes either in the green zone and or the purple, depending on what we come up with, and tabling that back so that we can have that comparative assessment. And the air quality work is starting, but obviously that will need to be amended to pick up any design alterations that are made off the back of the consultation response. So that will be taking place. And Andy, just quickly to respond to your comment around two-way working on Union Road, we can certainly look at that. It would have the knock-on effect that we couldn't potentially look at a bus lay-by there if we had two-way working, because there isn't the space. So it's pros and cons. But yeah, we can look at those.
Thanks, Alex. Peter.
Thank you, Tim. Well, excuse me, I certainly agree with what Andy and Catherine are saying. And I understand that there is a firm proposal is on the schedule to go to the March Farnham Board meeting. So I think by the sounds of it, we've still got a bit of work to do on this. But I would urge the FIP team to make sure that everything that's being suggested is thoroughly investigated, but does not hinder a firm proposal coming to the March board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, I mean, that is, yeah, as I said, that further work will happen, but absolutely that is the intention to try and get that finished before the March meeting. I'll go to Michaela because your hand was up, and then I'll go to the council office, council chamber. So Michaela first.
Thank you, Tim. I fully support the two-way traffic at the bottom of Downing Street at Longbridge, but like Catherine, I'm worried about the narrowing at the borough. And living and working in Farnham, I can realise when we have trouble on the bypass, it automatically comes through town. And I think we've got to look at the modelling of narrowing it down at the borough. And that's what's worrying me. Anyway, thank you.
I mean, the only thing I would say is that this conversation and all this work started because of the pollution along the borough, and if as part of this consultation we do nothing in terms of changing the borough, then I can't see that situation is going to change. But absolutely, I mean, we all recognise that changing any system will affect traffic flow and displacement, and it's kind of what that looks like, understanding that. But hopefully we can get to a point where there are, you're reassured that there are sufficient mitigations in place. But if we don't do anything with the borough, then I personally think that this scheme will not really have achieved that sort of that impact that I think we really all had hoped it would do. But so I go to the council chamber next, then, David.
Yes, yeah, thank you very much. Just a couple of points. On the borough, we acknowledge that there are problems there, but it has to be done sooner or later. And preferably sooner. But a link into that to our resolution that we should review the Upper Link Road before we make any movements on the borough. The other point I make, Union Road, we've considered this very carefully, and in fact, we would not be very supportive of a two-way traffic on Union Road because it is hindered by the bus stop, as has been mentioned. That bus stop is used by 7 or 8 buses per hour, of which 3 buses per hour use a stop as a terminus point with layover times, which would prevent the free flow of traffic if traffic flow was two-way. There is no room, as I've already said, to accommodate a bus stop lay-by at this location. The point made by Councillor McLeod about the traffic going to the A31, if they can still use the traffic along Victoria Road, it's just a small diversion. They really get to the A31, and so therefore we should think the status quo should continue to apply there. And also by doing that, we also believe that there would not then be the need for a traffic light junction at the traffic light junction at the junction with which come two-way on Downing Street. The purple, yes, we need the Woolmead. As we were encouraged by the responses going to be detailed investigation, possible two-way working on the Woolmead, and that's what we'll obviously take further. Further detail will be worked on that. Thank you.
Thank you, David. We'll go to Jeremy, and then we'll try and bring this to some conclusions. Jeremy.
Just very briefly to say on the borough, I think we do need to remember that this whole process really kicked off 3 years ago when we had that emergency pollution summit in Farnham, and I think it's really important that whatever else we do end up sorting out pollution levels in the borough, because I think that that would be an enormous disappointment to people in Farnham if we didn't do something that significantly achieved that. So very strongly support your approach on that, Tim.
Thank you, Jeremy. So I think, bearing in mind we've got some other items we need to get through, I think it's fair to say that subject to the further work, some of the modelling work, that broadly most people are comfortable with the proposals that are coloured green on that plan, accepting Catherine and Michaela's reservations around the borough, but those will be addressed. But I think other than that seems to have broad support. Further work to be done on the purple colours, but the team now will kind of get on and bring this all sort of to conclusion, and hopefully then come back in March with some firm proposals. In the meantime, I would just encourage everybody that has made comments, if they want to just reinforce those, to just drop an email to Elaine and to the team, so that that they've got to make sure they've got those on board. Are we happy then that we kind of move forward on that basis? I can't see anybody saying no. So thank you very much indeed. I mean, I do think, this is a big step forward. I know that it's complicated, and there are concerns. There are always going to be concerns and reservations around any changes, but I do think this takes it a big step forward, and hopefully, I do think it feels as if it's got the support of those residents that responded. But let's make sure that the finer detail is clarified and that people are comfortable with that, and we'll come back hopefully in March to do that. So on that basis, can we move then, Elaine, please, to the LSWIP?
Yes. Can we just, KT, move on to the next slide? So the Local Cycling and Walking Infrastructure Plan, also known as LCWIP. We've had a lot of engagement and workshops to develop the core walking zones and cycle routes. We've had a Q&A session with Waverley and Farnham members on the LCWIP process and routes. And we've come up with the latest plan, which is a short list of design proposals. And we've circulated it as well. I'm going to pass over to Neil McClure just for a bit of background on the Surrey sort of style and kind of what's happened in Surrey per se and their kind of funding programme. So I don't know if Neil is on the call, I can't see.
Yes. Yeah. Hello, Elaine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, Neil McClure, Future Transport Programme Manager at Surrey County Council. So I'm leading on the LSWIP rollout. I know a number of people here have been involved in the Waverley Borough LSWIP. So I think really, hopefully to help Elaine in sort of this discussion here is to set the context of where the Farnham LSWIP sits in relation to the wider county programme that we're developing. So as a number of people know, so we're developing LSWIPs essentially for each district and borough within the county of Surrey, with a view of it's, this kind of jigsaw piece and as a network map of high quality active travel, sustainable routes that come out of the process. We're not doing anything unique in Surrey. This is part of the government's central government gear change strategy push in terms of developing and increasing take up of active travel, cycling and walking, and directly for Surrey more locally links totally as one of the LTP4 key objectives or key deliverables in terms of we're developing decarbonising transport, developing active travel. LSWIPs is our method of developing the schemes and the routes to then go through the process. Excuse me. So yeah, to set the scene, so Farnham LSWIP is being developed as part of the separate infrastructure project here, obviously, and for the wider programme, the Waverley Borough LSWIP is the focus from my side, and naturally, obviously, the links into the two different LSWIP programmes join up as they do for other districts and boroughs in Surrey, and equally, obviously, outside Surrey, Hampshire, in a similar time frame, are developing their LSWIPs that cross the boundaries from Rushmore into Farnham here. The piece being that the work for Farnham is essentially more developed and more detailed than most other parts of the county. We have a Woking Town LSWIP, which is part of our pilot LSWIP when DfT first launched the process. But otherwise, Farnham is the only town that has this detail, and that's a benefit in one place. But obviously, there's a lot of detail coming through here that I know has generated a lot of discussion at the same time. So the push from central government is firstly to increase capability of you've got actual travelling set up, and to increase capability by having networks, LSWIPs set up in place, and having that programme of schemes that are coming through the system in readiness for the capital funding that's then made available to actually develop, finalise and build the schemes, which is the all important thing. So the LSWIP piece is a 10 plus year programme. The scope of work with Atkins that we're working for across the county is the same as the scope of work that's in place for Farnham, but as I say, it's on a lower level detail that the programme for Farnham is now being developed. The step process for LSWIP is effectively, the LSWIP is the plan, so that's step one of the process. To have the plan in place then enables you, which is, in some cases is lines on maps, in some areas, which is for Hampshire, for example. Surrey's taken a bit of a more advanced approach. We've developed the lines on maps through the prescribed DfT process. We have then put forward the measures and interventions on those prioritised routes within the plans, and I know that's what's generated quite a lot of discussion in this area as well. But I think the key message being that to approve the plan and move into the second stage, which is actually the detailed design and development stage of the routes, is what's needed to be able to take these routes forward. We're midway through the programme across Surrey, so half the districts and boroughs have now moved into their signing off process of their first stage. Waverley, which is most relevant here, has just finalise the draft final output plan of the stage 1 piece, with the view that after sign off there, we then move into the stage 2 with Atkins, which is the feasibility stage from our side, and importantly, it includes the public consultation on the actual schemes and the routes themselves. Early engagement has been part of this process, as you're obviously all full aware and have been involved in that. It doesn't replace public consultation as part of the more detailed process, but it does, it does give that early input and feedback engagement into where the routes have come from and how then that shapes the program going forward. I think just the key point, I think, really to get across, which I've certainly mentioned in the Waverley discussions we've had with members here and other areas, is that LSWIP is the vehicle for investment in active travel. So we are not funded to build the schemes. We don't have the money in place, and the idea is that you have to develop the schemes, and Active Travel England are heavily pushing that the more development that is in place across the country is going to enable them to then allocate the funding better, to make sure that the right routes in the right places are developed in with this big objective of increasing the uptake of active travel in all areas. Funding wise, as I say, we're not funded. The next round of DFT Active Travel Tranche 4 is around the corner. That's one funding stream and probably the main source at the moment that's coming through the rounds. There are other funding sources that we're expecting to be able to prioritise the routes from these areas and take forward, including SIL contributions from the local area. Surrey is within County Council, it's in our strategic infrastructure programme, so it's already prioritised for investment where it can. But the idea is that to have the schemes developed, you have to be in the running there for actually bidding for the schemes, which for the Active Travel Tranche 4 from DFT, unless you've got an LSWIP, you can't actually put routes forward. So that the big push is to move through this process. I think
sorry, unless there's anything else, I think we're conscious we've got a few other items to get onto. Sure. So I think it's a very helpful update. There are workshops now, continuing conversations with members and councillors. So if we can just make sure that those people contribute. Catherine, unless there's something, I don't really want to open a conversation about the detail of this, other than just to update people on the process. So could you be really quick?
Can I just raise one question or one statement? I am really disappointed that this document doesn't in any place mention the inclusive mobility guidance that was issued in January. It's not even in the document. And that does require minimum pavement widths of 2 metres with various other things. And I would just encourage us, please, to look at that and to look at the pedestrian provision on the basis of that as part of the update that we will do with councillors moving forward. Sorry, okay. Tim, I just needed to mention
fine, Catherine. Yeah, well, Neil will pick that point up, or note that point and come back to you. But yes, fair enough. All right, just apologies, but I just want us to get through to the rest of the end of this agenda, if we can, please. So, Elaine, the A31 corridor update.
Yes, so we've been working quite hard in the background. We had with our members a Q&A discussion on the modelling, which has been done. That's also the town centre. Because we're trying to move quite swiftly and demonstrate to DFT that we're committed to some improvements, we've completed a preliminary environmental options assessment report. And we've also responded to multiple clarifications from the DFT on the strategic business case. We've reviewed policy alignment and obviously the modelling that we've done. We developed as part of the consultation, the material, the drawings, the schematics, and we've also, any new emerging sort of policy documents that have come forward, we've responded to them on active travel, national bus strategy and gear change policy. We've been engaging with our planning teams and Transport for the South East. And as part of the consultation, we have been taking on the feedback that you've all been telling us. And we have heard actually from DFT some initial kind of response from their investment board of this is positive, but we haven't got their formal position yet. So, the business case was positive, but it's just a case of we're competing with other schemes in the area, in the country. So Tim.
Okay. Yeah, so so far so good. We just need to keep pressure on government to get this scheme on the list for funding. So we'll hear something further early part of next year. That'll be right. Yep. Okay, good. Well, moving on, Andy,
Just a very quick comment, if I may, Tim, that the earlier presentation on the public response, a bit of concern that the public seems to favour the underpass, and it's not that surprising because that was mooted as a solution, you know, almost 20 years ago. But I don't think most of us actually, the councillors, think that that's the answer now, actually. But it is a bit of a problem if that's what the public thinks is the answer to this problem, actually.
Well, I think in the absence of any other proposal, that you kind of see why they might think that. But I think, you know, let's see where this piece of work goes with government, because I think if we get the funding, I think it'd probably be quite a good solution. But
yeah,
we'll see. Okay, thank you, Elaine. Then item 6, overview of progress.
Yeah, so Recklesham and Western bypasses, as requested at the last Farnham board, we have actually started work on some initial cost and environmental feasibility work. So we'll be coming back to the next board with a paper on the outcome of that. Next slide. So adjacent projects. It's always good to know if it's kind of part of Farnham infrastructure programme. We're keeping an eye, all of us together. So on the adjacent projects, we've got Recklesham Bridge, which is, you know, important to people of Farnham. Obviously, it's had some bridge strikes. So in order to kind of make sure that we're addressing this and we're listening, our highway safety team have cut back some of the foliage on the approaches to the bridge. They've had some very detailed discussions with Network Rail to make it more conspicuous. So obviously includes painting of the bridge, which is very expensive. I mean, we're talking over 100,000. And actually the team have successfully negotiated, Network Rail actually delivering this and paying for it. And they've committed to painting it before the end of this financial year. So that's a real positive for the team. We're also looking at feasibility study of the medium and the kind of the long-term options available for the bridge, and we'll be coming back with a feasibility study to the next board.
Okay, thank you, Michaela. You're on mute, Michaela, there.
I'm sorry, I was muted. I thank Sari for looking further into measures for Recklesham Bridge. However, they are short-term measures. We need some more meat on this. I would wish Sari to even further talk to Network Rail and look into see if we have more radical engineering measures, such as a pedestrian tunnel, or could we look into this further, please? Because cutting back foliage and painting a bridge, okay for the minute, but we've got to look at some really further long-term measures. Thank you.
Thanks, Michaela. Peter.
Thank you, Tim. Just briefly, I've had a couple of conversations with Tom Horwood, the Chief Executive Waverley, and he suggested it would be useful to have some signage on the A3 which would try and prevent HGVs turning along this route and instead carrying along to the M25 or wherever. And I think some conversations with Hampshire County Council about that kind of signage would be very useful. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, good suggestion. I mean, I think, Michaela, the problem is that this, you know, Network Rail own this asset. It's not owned or controlled by the county council. So I mean, I'm sure that the team will continue to have conversations with Network Rail about options, but there's I'm afraid not a lot that we can do to kind of force Network Rail on it. But so I mean, although except that these are only sort of short term and not, you know, solutions, long-term solution. But I think, I mean, Lane, I mean, there is an active dialogue, isn't there, with Network Rail?
Yes, there is.
So we'll continue to sort of get them to have a think about things that can be done. It's not good for them to have their bridge hit either, to be honest with you. But
that's all we want to know, Tim. Is there a conversation with Network Rail, and that you can actually maybe put some bit of pressure onto them?
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
all.
no,
Thank you.
we'll do that. I'm afraid they're a bit like the Environment Agency. They are very difficult to to engage with and encourage to do things, certainly when it costs money. But we will absolutely make sure that those options are we get them to investigate those as much as we possibly can.
Tim, just to note on that, we'll be monitoring as we go the effectiveness of each stage that we do. So it will be an ongoing process.
Okay, thank you. Elaine, is that everything from you?
Just the speed management scheme, just quickly.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah.
Jump onto that. So we've commissioned a detailed design to reduce the speed limit between to 50 between Waden Lane and the Western County boundary. And this includes a reduction to 1 lane to the west of Coxbridge roundabout. So we've got this proceeding in the background, and hopefully implementation by August 2023.
Okay, thank you. I can't see any comments on that. So thank you very much. I think that just leaves us with a couple of minutes from Ben or Abby on engagement.
Yeah, you can just see there. Obviously done a lot of public consultation in the last period, and there's always a lot of wider conversations that happen with partners and stakeholders, which you can see outlined there. If there's anything else on that.
Okay, David.
Yeah, so just a quick point. We would certainly, as a town council, welcome greater engagement with our officers and members, because we have found that in the past that some silly mistakes have been made through lack of local knowledge, actually, particularly in the wayfinding project. And we would certainly encourage, now that we're entering a design stage, more greater local engagement with our officers and members. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And absolutely. I mean, we have made, I think, some really good progress in terms of that sort of joint working between the 3 councils, apart from anything else. So I know that the Surrey officers are value very much that local knowledge and input. So I'm sure that they will work as closely with your team as they possibly can. Certainly, as you say, now that we're getting towards the detailed design and implementation. Yep, Jeremy.
Tim, I just wanted to finish by thanking you and your team, because these are really difficult issues, and I can just see that an enormous amount of work has gone into this. And we in Farnham have strong views on things, and you've been very, very generous in helping to find a way through. And I think also you've been completely impartial in all of this, just wanting to do the right thing for the town. And I would also like to thank people from the different political parties, because I think it's the fact that we've all come together from different political parties that's meant that we've been able to make this progress. So that was just my Merry Christmas thank you to everyone.
Thank you, Jeremy. Yes, and I would endorse that. I think it's been a challenging but good exercise in terms of really focusing on what the residents of Farnham want and delivering that. Are there any final comments from anybody before we end the meeting? No, I can't see any hands up. So thank you all very much. The next meeting of this board is Friday, the 24th of March, 2023. But obviously there'll be continuing engagement and dialogue between now and then. So can I, on behalf of the officers as well at Surrey County, thank you all very much, and look forward to catching up in the new year. And in the meantime, I wish you all a very happy Christmas and hopefully a bit of a break. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Happy Christmas.
Thank you. Happy Christmas, everyone.
Happy Christmas.
Bye-bye.
Bye.